state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter continues today. Carter has been lying in repose at the Carter Presidential Center since Saturday. Today, he'll leave the center for the final time, headed for Washington, where a motorcade will visit the U.S. Navy Memorial before the funeral procession travels to the Capitol building. Tonight, Carter will lie at Capitol Rotunda, where he'll stay until Thursday before the procession moves to the National Cathedral. Joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of The Washington Post, Eugene Robinson. Eugene, as a one-term Democratic president, Carter spent much of his life listening to Republicans dictating politics in the South. So looking at politics in this new age, how has the Republican Party and the Democratic Party evolved from those positions?
Oh, boy.
A lot. And we've only got 2 minutes, so make it fast.
Well, you know, the difference between like then and today is that the Democratic and Republican parties were at odds about civil rights, about many things back then. But they were reading from the same book. They were sort of on the same page, even though they disagreed on many things. Today, they're not on the same page. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party it's as if they live in different worlds. And that's a big difference. And so these state funerals, when a president passes away and we look back at that president's administration, it's an occasion to get that sort of historical perspective. I think the more we learn and sort of understand where we've been, the better chance we have of making sense of where we are now.
Understanding where we've been, but also marking the ways that the presidency and the men who assume it have changed. I mean, you look at someone like Jimmy Carter, the ways that he's being remembered, and then you watch the ushering in of a second term of Donald Trump.
Yeah, you watch and think of all. Jimmy Carter's a really interesting person because he has done so many things and he has expertise in so many different fields, from being on a nuclear submarine to being a peanut farmer to being a governor of Georgia, taking courageous stands when he was in that office. And you compare that to now we're about to inaugurate a president who's, well, he has held elective office once before when he was president, but,
and that was half the appeal.
But who has an entirely different life experience and an entirely different sense of how to do the job and kind of a different sense of what this country is.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the inflection points that we've seen, you have a new piece for the Washington Post titled "Why We Should Remember January 6th, 2025." Explain that.
Well, you know, we tend to forget, and there's been this concerted effort, frankly, by the Republican Party to sort of memory hole January 6th, 2021. But I will never forget that day. You will never forget that day. The members of Congress who were there and who were crouched in that chamber, worried that the mob was going to break through any minute, they will never forget that day either, even if they pretend to. And so I just thought it was important to draw the contrast between that transfer of power and the one we're seeing now. This is the way it's supposed to happen, the way it happened yesterday, from one part to the other. No fuss, no muss, no insurrection, but that depends. So much of the way our system works depends on that sort of honor and goodwill
and
that, for example, and people, right? So Vice President Harris presided over the certification of her own defeat.
Right.
Al Gore did the same thing in 2000.
So
Richard Nixon did the same thing in 1961. That's the way it's supposed to work, and I just hope people were paying attention.
And the fact, I mean, we were talking about this with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, the fact that you saw Harris there presiding over her own loss, and Pence, who tried to do the same thing, ultimately did do the same thing, but, of course, faced the massive headwinds and the insurrection.
Exactly.
A stark contrast. The Washington Post, Eugene Robinson, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on Morning Joe.